Thanks, Tom. The state of play in 2021 is improving as families feel more comfortable to return. Still, there are significant challenges ahead, especially since kids under 12 entered the fall ineligible to be vaccinated, and so many more kids are now out of shape. The CDC found that 22% of children and teens are obese during the pandemic, an alarming increase from 19% before COVID-19. Each year, Project Play collects and analyzes youth sports participation figures from the previous year provided by the Sports and Fitness Industry Association. During COVID-19, we have also conducted periodical surveys with Utah State University to understand parent and child experiences in real time. All of this information is available in our National State of Play 2021 report by visiting as.pn/SOP 2021. The good news, more kids are playing sports than a year ago. 47% of youth sports parents said in September their child has resumed sports at the same level as before the pandemic. That's up from 40% 5 months earlier. 17% of children resumed playing at a higher level than before COVID. The average child between ages 6 to 18 played 11 hours per week in September. That's slightly down from April, but up 57% from where we were a year ago. Unfortunately, which kids regularly play sports is again determined by money. 24% of youth in the highest income bracket have resumed sports at a greater level than before the pandemic. That number is only 13 to 14% for their peers from lower income brackets. There are still fears about returning to sports. Half of all youth sports parents view their child becoming sick as a potential barrier to resume play. Yet parent comfort levels with children playing travel sports, community-based sports, and school sports are the highest they have been during the pandemic. For those families who do want to return, they may be coming back to diminished services. 13% of youth sports parents indicated their community-based sports provider closed due to COVID-19, and another 12% said it merged with another organization. In total, more than 4 of 10 families said their community-based sports provider has either closed, merged, or returned with limited capacity. These changes could result in a profound impact on the quality and accessibility of programs. Travel sports parents report similar issues. 15% say their travel-based provider closed during COVID-19, 8% merged with another league or club, and 23% return with limited capacity. Finally, there's the question of how many children will remain interested in sports. When Project Play in Utah State conducted its first COVID-19 survey in June 2020, 19% of youth sports parents said their child was not interested in playing sports. By September 2021, that figure was 28%. The more money a family has, the less interest a child has in sports these days. Worth considering? Maybe sports before COVID-19 was never good for many children, and they need a new experience in order to return. With that, I want to briefly bring in Travis Dorsch. He's founding director of Utah State University's Families and Sports Lab, which partner with Project Play on these COVID-19 surveys. So what trends are you going to look for in the next year to determine the impact of COVID-19 on the state of play?
Well, a number of trends, John, and I appreciate the question, and I think you did a nice job laying out some of the most pertinent from our data collections. But really, the one that stands out to me, and there's two, but I'll start with this, and that is the calculus that parents are using to decide whether or not their kids are coming back, right? And if you think about these measurables that we've had in these surveys, we've measured parents' fear of illness for themselves and for their young people. And you mentioned in your intro here that roughly half of the youth sport parents that we surveyed suggested that they fear either for themselves or their children's illness if they're to go back to sports. So that's one trend line that I'll be very interested in following. And really, when you juxtapose that on top of the understanding that parents really trust the people at the grassroots level the most, in other words, their coaches, their organizational leaders, much more than they might community, state, and national leaders when it comes to COVID-19, the vaccines, the implementation of any restrictions. So I'll be following that very closely, how much fear there is in the parent population around their kids coming back to sports. And then the second trend line that I really want to follow is this idea of athlete outcomes. We think about sports so often, John, as this context that creates positive outcomes for youth. But when we measure children's mental health, their physical fitness, their emotional control, and their social well-being, anywhere from 25 to 30% of parents said that in these four categories, their children were actually getting worse during COVID-19. So it seems that sport hasn't really been given the platform or the opportunity to do what we know it can do when designed and delivered well.
Absolutely, yeah, the big trend lines that we're going to keep looking at moving forward. Thanks so much for joining us, Travis. Thank you again for your support with all of the data. It's really terrific research. And again, you can find the entire National State of Play 2021 report by visiting as.pn/SOP 2021.